like to discuss the difficulties that arose a little over 400 years ago when science began to develop, the science that we think of, modern science. And whereas before that, things had stayed pretty steady for many, many centuries. So we'll look at a whole bunch of areas, but just to get a quick glance at the change that has occurred in the last 400 years, if we take a look at, this is a table. The first column, the red column, is just ages that you could live to, perhaps. Second is the city, London, in 1662. This was data gathered for insurance purposes and stuff already. And you can see your chance of, unfortunately, PowerPoints don't always line up the same way as my version. My other one does line up, but the chance of making it 26 is about 25% back in London, 1662. And whereas today, of course, it's almost 100%. There'll be a few deaths, but for the most part, it will be, you'll still be alive. And on the other hand, if we go way out to 66, we can see that the Londoners, only about 3% of them made it. We wouldn't have any Social Security problems today if we had the 1662 numbers. Whereas today, we're about 83% make it to that. There's a famous quote by Thomas Hobbes, 17th century life was nasty, brutish, and short, and even in London, it's pretty much the case here. I really apologize for this misalignment. Everything looked good. All right, 25 centuries ago, we have to go back to ancient Greece where some great things were accomplished. Kind of the organization of Western civilization, the basic knowledge in many, many fields was put together and developed in a rather systematic way by names like Aristotle and Plato. And the logic, Aristotle's logic, Euclid's geometry, the politics, they were put down for us and still really quite usable today. And they served as a basis for the development of knowledge. Now, one thing they did, which ends up to be a problem for science, is there was a great elevation of the intellect. They had the feeling, because they accomplished so much, even in mathematics, proofs, that if you sat down and thought about something long enough, you'd get the right answer. That was it. You just had to sit around and think about it. It's kind of summarized in this doctrine of recollections that Plato had, that simply said knowledge is simply recollection. That is, when you were born, when you took on human form, you had within you the universal soul, ideal understandings and knowledge that had to be recalled to you as you grew up. So as a child, as you gradually came to understand things, you were simply remembering things that were there in this inner self already. And okay, so our soul must have been somewhere, at our birth. And his argument goes something like this, that take a look at that statue on the left, the sculpture on the left. It just looks beautiful. Now, it doesn't take me a half an hour to say that. I look at it and instantaneously I say, wow, that's kind of beautiful. I mean, it's maybe not my favorite subject, but it's a beautiful statue. And he said that's really because you're contacting the universal soul within you. That the sense of ideal beauty or perfect beauty is already there, and you're just bringing it to the surface. So it's just a way, way of looking at the world. Okay. It still does sound a little loud to me.
No.
No? Okay. So what happens is this. Plato, one of the great philosophers, basically presented his work as, for the most part, dialogues involving Socrates, the philosopher Socrates, with acolytes. They would come around. Socrates would say all these wonderful things, and his students would raise questions about them. So, and these dialogues all had names. This particular one's called the Phaedo, and I picked this one because it's the last one. Socrates, because he was kind of a troublemaker, he's sentenced to death. At the end of this day, he's got to take hemlock and die. What do you do in the last day of your life? Well, you philosophize. I mean, what else would you do, right? It's like that. So he has a group of men around him, and they're discussing these things. That he makes this point that the human body, the eyes, somehow you have to get separated from that. In order for us to reach the truth, our body, this mass of evil, our desire is the truth, and we can't really search for it very well while we're in human form. So that's this sense that we have, this limitation that we have. So we can reach whatever truth we can reach is just by thinking. Just think hard enough and you'll get the answer. I'll just give you one quick anecdote that describes this. They talked about three students in the Middle Ages studying Aristotle's biology. They all had handwritten copies, and they're working through for cramming for an exam. And one they come to the number of teeth in a horse's mouth. The first student has 30 teeth in a horse's mouth. The next student in his copy has 32 teeth, and the third student has 34 teeth. So they begin talking back and forth. Well, what's the right number of teeth in a horse's mouth? The ideal number. If we think this through enough, we'll come up with the right answer. Well, after a while, they're still arguing, and one of them finally says, there are 3 horses in the barn. Why don't we just go out there and look at the horse's mouth? What do you mean? We don't want to do that. So, that was the outlook. We can figure it out with our intellect. Okay, so fast forward 2,000 years, and pretty much the thought, if we're not in religion, the thought is still the ancient Greek thought. That's what Aristotle said goes, and the other philosophers too, from those days, Archimedes, many other very, very brilliant men, but and of course the religion is developing as well. So along comes Galileo, who's considered to be the father of modern science, and I'll see if I can't get you to the point of seeing that's the case here. Here's a painting of him as a younger man. If you look through books and when you see him, he usually appears very, very old. There are a lot of paintings of him when he's older, but here he's this dynamic guy, kind of burly. If you look hard at the eyes in his painting, his arrogance and absolute self-assurance comes out. This guy was tough. They said in a half hour he could convince you of anything and win any argument to boot. Here we start out, we see him at 1590. He's a very young man. He's trying to get a job in Padua. And his assignment, part of his assignment is to prepare a couple of lectures about the Dante's The Circles of Hell in Dante's Inferno and the Divine Comedy. This is a little weird, right? But this is what you do back in 1590. So he prepares a couple of lectures. By the way, here's a view. This is not Galileo's view, but here's a view of this guy may work do the job. Here's a view of the circles of hell. As it goes down, you're worse and worse as you go down. These are the deceivers are down here. There's a space to be filled yet by used car salesmen or something. We also have to allow plenty of room for new arrivals, as that come along. But so they actually worked out how big hell had to be to handle all the people around. The whole thing is so weird. All it does, what does it mean? It means nothing except that they thought very differently. All you're supposed to be doing in your life is worrying about saving your eternal soul. So anything that relates to that and encourage your thinking along those lines, because you certainly don't want to end up here, is something you should do. His lectures are so good that he does get the job, and around 1600, a few years later, he finally kind of abandons all the scholastic stuff. And he has this quote, which I'll read to you now. So, I think that in the discussion of natural problems, we ought to begin with experiments and demonstrations. So, obvious, revolutionary, dangerous that you think that you, within you, could come up with something that matters in the world. What are you doing? Wasting your time, demonstrations. You got to be worrying about making it to heaven rather than hell. So, but this is what he was trying to sell here, this idea, which created problems here. By the way, he went back and looked at Aristotle, and I'll just pick one thing that famous thing Aristotle said, you probably heard of. He said, a 1 pound object falls at a certain rate of speed, a 10 pound object will fall 10 times faster. Aristotle said it's obvious. Now, did he ever get up out of the chair and go outside and test it? Maybe he did, but for some reason it didn't make it into his physics. So I've got this demo. This is really great. This is a video that shots from a video where we've lifted a car up. First of all, this is a crane that happens to be the same height as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and Galileo supposedly did some of his tests from the Leaning Tower. So we've got a crane as tall as that, And what we've done is to find two objects of different mass or weight. One's a car and one's a big wheel from a truck. And they've been carried all the way up 169 feet. Now, over here on this side, this is after they've fallen about 100 feet. We've got a little fuzzy stop shot, and you can see they're definitely falling at the same rate. It looks like they're stuck together, in fact. Okay, so Galileo said, hey, this makes sense. Then he gave a lot of verbal arguments as to why this had to be the case. And I wish I could discuss them. His writing is so good. Even today, you can read a lot of his books. If you're in school in Italy, you would still be learning about how to write literature from Galileo's writings. They're truly, truly interesting. Okay, so this is a simple one, but here's the crux, the key of what Galileo did that makes it extremely important. You know, I just finished this book. Let's see. Well, first, let me see what we've got here. We've got a very sparse room. There's really nothing here except this funny-looking carved piece of wood, which is simply an inclined plane that balls can roll down. And its claim to fame here is that it's got little bells on it, and those bells, will ring if the ball goes by and hits them. And this is the setting for an experiment. And the idea of an experiment is you isolate some phenomenon that you want to understand in special circumstances. We've got no frills here, no windows, no dressing, no uniforms, vestments, or anything. Look, we just want to look at this motion problem. So how did Galileo handle this, and how does this experiment work? Well, essentially, he wants to know how far the ball is rolled in given amounts of time. Measuring how far it's fallen is easy. Rulers have been around for ages and ages. But time, he could not measure time well. He had already discovered stuff about the motion of pendulums being consistent, but we didn't have a clock yet. But he was a good musician. His father was a composer, excellent musician, and the father and son used to play duets on the lute. And what he knew was that you could keep the beat to a song very precisely. You know, let's say we go, row, row, row your boat. The time intervals are very consistent there. And any other song that has a beat will serve. I guess he probably used rock music for this too, but he didn't have it then. So the idea was, he said, look, with the intervals, by the way, if you know anything about music, we've got different notes. You have whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 32nd notes, 60. I think Beethoven in the string quartets, there's 128th note in there somewhere, but not to say you could play it, but you can divide the times up quite well uniformly. We don't know absolutely what they are, but relative is all that really matters. So he said, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep rolling this ball down, which he did hundreds of times, and I want to set it up until the bells ring like this. When I go, row, row, row your boat, the bells go ding, 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 ding. And if that happens, then I'm talking about uniform time intervals. So he did this, and he came up with these numbers here. I had to make up a distance unit. He found out to the first ding, 0 to the first ding, 1 Galileo. I don't know what a Galileo is, but I'm just making it up here. Between the first and second ding, the ball rolls 3 Galileos, and then 5 Galileos, and then 7 Galileos. It's the sequence of odd numbers. I mean, him discovering to figure this out, this must have been, I can't imagine, it must have been as dramatic to him as discovering the moons of Jupiter, really. People have been paying attention to the way things have fallen down, even people falling down, for thousands of years. And here he says, look, I've got just a secret. Here's really what's going on. It's just a sequence of odd numbers, which you can even teach to anybody. You don't have to be highly educated to have been able to do this. So he makes there's other planes, if they're tilted more, you go further in any time interval, but the 1, 3, 5, 7 is obeyed. And he finally said that if you just drop a rock, it's going to obey the 1, 3, 5, 7 rule as well. And he made some calculations on that, which are approximately true, but there is some systematic error. But the point is, this is an experiment, special equipment, isolated, and we're just focusing on this. And this is something I, talked about students. The fact that he isolated everything and set up this artificial situation allows him to make the most general statement about motion, which is like, it seems paradoxical unless you scratch your head about it just a little bit. So he's considered to be the other people have done experiments before, but the way he set forward, this is the way you do everything. This is the way you study everything. Well, he's well known, as I said, very bright, capable lecturer, and he knew Pope Urban VIII when he was still a cardinal. And Galileo had a number of trips to Rome. He and the Pope, then cardinal, met many times and talked things over. And Galileo made a point, another one of these scary points, where he says, like, it's hard for me to believe that God, who endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect, has wanted us to forego their use. He says this to Urban. Well, okay, but whatever you do, don't talk about Copernicus. Copernicus with the theory of the sun in the middle of the solar system, that was in 1616. Well, if we move ahead to 1633, Galileo publishes a dialogue, excellent book, interesting book. Three gentlemen, friends, are getting together. The man on the left is kind of the Galileo person, Salviati. The man in the middle represents Aristotle, and his name, unfortunately, is Simplicio. This is Simplicio here, okay? And on the right, we've got this gadfly Segredo, interesting guy. So this book is published in Florence, and it contains some concerning stuff. Galileo, the arrogance came out here. He was not supposed to talk about Copernicus, but he chooses to speak about the world systems. And the standard one, the one that's generally accepted, is the Aristotelian view that the Earth is at the center of the universe, sitting here motionless, and all the things we see in the sky are just simply rotating. There are various layers and circles that rotate, including the stars. And that's the way it is. I mean, look, it feels like we're standing still, right? Common sense, which is the good old, Greek retreat. On the other hand, we have Copernicus, who's put the sun in the middle, and he's got the planets going around. Here's the Earth, here's Jupiter. And he discusses both of these. And dangerous ground. But he says, I have a way out. I know I'm going to avoid trouble because I'm going to use Simplicio to, after we have this discussion, say, it's a waste of time to even have this discussion. It said, God can easily move the universe as a piece of straw. It's like get out of jail free disclaimer about what he had been discussing. The problem is, back in Rome, the people around the Pope talk about the dialogue, and they don't see Simplicio as representing the Aristotelian method. They said, see, Simplicio, Pope, that's you. That's you. You're the fool in the dialogue. Well, not good news, really, for Galileo, and he gets called to Rome. He's now much older and infirm. In fact, we'll see. Here's the Galileo on the right, or say 70, the time we're talking about here. And the trip to Rome could probably kill him. Einstein had a comment about the dialogue. He said, it represents a downright roguish attempt to comply with the Pope's order, but to disregard. And the Inquisition wasn't really too happy about this. So Galileo's called to Rome. He refuses to go. He's called again, and more insistently by the Pope. And finally, he ends up in Rome here on trial. The trial lasts 3 days, by the end of which they get him to admit that the truth is he talked about Aristotle's system and Copernicus's, but he favored Copernicus's, looking things over. And so he's forced to renounce this. He abjures the extreme religious renouncement that the Earth does not move. It sits still at the center of the universe. Now, supposedly, by the way, as you look at this, you see all these religious vestments on everyone, except that guy standing right behind Galileo. He's the enforcer. Tony Soprano's enforcer. Galileo's looking over his shoulder like this. And but he goes along with this. But they said as he walked out, he muttered under his breath, and yet it moves. No. And yet it moves. So they kind of thought he would get, very old now, that he would get some mild punishment. But the Pope was incensed. He was still completely angry, and he still saw Galileo as a dangerous character. So he sends him to life in prison. There's a number of the cardinals around said, well, we got to give him some room. He'll be dead in a month, and it's going to look bad for us. So they make it house arrest. He's allowed to go back home. However, he can't bring in any students to talk to them and spread all these crazy ideas he has. So Galileo does spend the rest of his life in house arrest. When this happens, by the way, it scares every scientist in all of Christian Europe. Rene Descartes was about to publish a book. He withdrew it. He burned it and burned all his notes because the last thing you want to do is to be chased around by the church for the rest of your life. You wouldn't be burned at the stake anymore, but in the other countries at least, I mean, conceivably it might still be in Rome, but Italian science was hurt badly. I would say it isn't until Enrico Fermi, 300 years later, where you get them really being at the forefront of science goings on in the world. Okay, so on to the Enlightenment here. Let me just see how I'm doing here. All right. The Enlightenment's an interesting thing to talk about because the events are a little harder to put down. But the gist of it was it's a vast turbulence that knowledge and belief that shook up European civilization to its foundation. And the first thing we see about it, what does it have to do with science? Well, Newton's considered to be the key figure. This is a little verse that you probably heard sometime in your life here. Nature and nature's law lay hidden night, and God said, let Newton be, and there was light. Now, with Newton, all these things that mankind had seen for literally thousands of years, he cataloged the motions of the stars and the motion of the planets, but it was all kind of, how does this possibly work? You know, you're accepting this grand miracle. Surely it's still miraculous, but how could it make any sense? And what happened was Newton was able to come along and make sense out of it, essentially with one kind of master equation, which we'll look at in a minute or two. In fact, in one case, let's go on here. We'll come back to that in a second, but we got this verse. One of the things that happened here was that witchcraft was in trouble. In other words, once we have this understanding that there are nice laws of nature, that all that stuff that happens in the sky is obeying God's rules. Things are never changing. So people would come forward and say, somebody gave me the evil eye, but the learned classes, which usually made up the judiciary, this is a quote from the Times, it's simply impossible for devils or witches to change the course that God has set in nature. That's really the point. There's a rhyme and reason to things. There's a clockwork to the universe. It's really pretty dramatic. By the way, the witches thing isn't incidental. I mean, we know about Salem, but they figure in Europe there are at least 50,000 people who were killed as witches over the years. I don't know how in the world we can, I don't know if I can read this. All right, he introduced insights that spread around. He talked about, we think it was obvious, a lot of his stuff, again, this is like Galileo, of course it's obvious, but the notion of a dynamic balance, a balance of forces, he talked about. I'm pulling my hands apart here as hard as I can, but nothing's happening, even though I'm exerting a force, because there's a balance here, you know, that occurs. And they extended that to this balance of trade. Countries trade back and forth. You see boats traveling every day. At the end of the year, you see, hey, nothing happens. It's the same as last year. That we have a balance of trade, or excuse me, balance of power, a term we still use today. We talk about the laws of nature and nature's God. So, and this painting, which I had up in the beginning, you know, like just before we start, it's considered an Enlightenment painting. The light in this painting is warmth and positive. It radiates a real positivity. And we have apparently the teacher in red up there talking about what's going on in this orrery, which is a model of the solar system. We can't see all the planets and stars. The kids there are really getting the best view of everything. They can see but it shows how everything moves in the sky. And this man at the left apparently is learning this stuff, but you can see this kind of a positive thing about it. It's comfortable painting. We can't go through the whole Constitutional Convention. It's been pointed out to me that there's a quote in play Hamilton, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction somewhere. Rachel, who said that? I can't remember who said it.
It's, I think it might be Jefferson.
Jefferson, okay.
Yeah.
But here's John Adams, who was kind of a theoretician. There were a lot of very, very bright guys in the founding group. Some of them were quite impetuous, though, like Hamilton. But he's a real theoretician, and he contemplates: should we have a unicameral or a bicameral legislature? Should there be a House or a Senate? or should there be a House and a Senate? And he said, Newton's laws suggest that if we're going to have any peace and we need a balance, that we need to have this bicameral legislature. So the election, the voting we just had last week, you thank Newton for the fact that there are two houses. Not that it's made much difference in the end.
Thank him with blame.
Yeah, we have. I don't want to get any closer to politics. Just to give you some sense of what Newton had to say, one day he actually thought about the apple. Didn't hit him on the head, but he was thinking about an apple falling. He said, "I wonder if the force could be the same that brings the apple to the earth as the force that keeps the moon in its orbit." And he did some mental mathematics and came up, this looks like it's going to work. And his famous gravity equation really came from that. And with that, he was able to explain the not only the apple, but the moon and all the planets and their motions. How can this moon be like the apple? Well, here's a diagram of Newton. So I can just show you the. Let's see. I think he said, "Look, get up on top of the mountain with a big cannon, and you go boom, and aim the cannon parallel to the ground, and the cannonball hits here. Put some more gunpowder in, boom, and it goes all the way out here to E. Put a really lot of gunpowder in, it might get all the way to F." And he said, if you really put a lot of gunpowder in, it's going to go all the way here and fall off the end of the earth and just keep going around and around and around. So he said, that's what's happening. The only difference between the apple and the moon is the moon has a horizontal speed built into it. And that's why, fortunately for us, it doesn't fall in, so to speak. Okay. The other mention Franklin. Quickly, this experiment you probably heard of. It's a much more subtle experiment than it looks like here in the picture. But he does show that the electricity in lightning is related to the electricity from experiments that he was doing in the laboratory. What he really did not look like this. He actually had equipment where that key is that he would go by it. You often think of this in a cold, rainy day, and Ben and Mother Franklin are sitting around the fire, keeping warm in their armchairs, and there's a big stroke of lightning, boom, and Ben jumps up out of his chair, and his wife says, "Ben, what are you doing?" He says, "I have to go outside." "What do you mean? You're going to get rain? It's raining, cats and dogs out." Said, "Mother, where's that key? Extra key to the front door? Where is that?" "Well, what are you talking about? You can't go outside." So the key's on the mantle. So he grabs the key, goes away, comes back with a kite. "Ben, what are you doing?" And he goes out. I mean, this guy's a nerd. We're talking 18th century nerd, you know what I mean? But great. He was a really, really good experimenter. Okay. Now, from his experiments, we get the first super practical device to come out of this hobby work of scientists, and that's the lightning rod. This is St. Mark's Tower in Venice, which was struck by lightning at least a dozen times until 1776. And they put a lightning rod, and it has not been struck by lightning ever since. And so that we had a situation now where science just didn't mean much to anybody. But all of a sudden, every little town with a church and a steeple in every state of Europe that was involved with, at least with Christianity, is going to have this lightning rod going up to the top if they want to prevent it from being struck by lightning. So all of a sudden, Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, first suggested this really, that all of a sudden science had meaning even down to some person in a small town, rather than just a hobby for those with means. So just a passing, and I can't help but mention this, the First Amendment, we always think of it as involving political speech. But a lot of the discussion about this was scientific speech. They wanted scientists to be able to come up with new ideas all the time. And they faced a real obstacle with church elders. Church elders didn't really like these new ideas. They were not happy with the lightning rod, by the way. They felt that the lightning rod should not be installed. They felt if God wants to come after us with lightning, who are we to argue this point, okay? And in fact, they said, all around Boston, we had lightning rods in revolutionary times. There was a big earthquake in Boston. And the church came forward. See that? You're trying to keep the lightning away, and he came after us with an earthquake. So all right, so scientific speech was involved in this, although we would not have thought of it normally. All right, here we go with Darwin. Let me make sure I'm not too far up. Okay, here we go. So Darwin, as we know, in his ideas, he turns the world upside down, and then one court case, which we surely have heard of at least. The first evolution debate. Origin of Species is only a couple months old, and Oxford, they're always having these debates, and two heavyweights here come together. On the left, we have Bishop Wilberforce. These are from Punch, caricatures from Punch. The bishop got a little extra size there, but I'm sure that's equaled out here in some way or other. So Bishop Wilberforce is there to speak against Darwin and the origin of species. He's already written a 10,000-word book review, tearing it apart. On the right-hand side, you have Thomas Huxley, who believes in Darwin's ideas, and he's going to be defending them. Now, Darwin won't be there. Darwin would never come to a debate like this. He was so retiring. He was 50. He was hiding at home, claiming he was sick. But they just said he would not come up for anything like this. Another example, we have a lot of people who are really good talkers, okay, but they don't necessarily have many good ideas. Whereas you have someone like Darwin, who's a terrible talker, wouldn't be in public, and he had great ideas. So there's two different things. So we don't have any kind of a transcript from this debate, but there was one question, and this is always a key one. The question that's remembered is from the bishop. Here we go. From which branch of ape or monkey is Professor Huxley descended? The tough question to answer. And when we were little kids, the first time we talked about evolution, we used to talk about that. We came from monkeys or something. But Huxley had an answer here. I'd rather have a monkey as an ancestor than a brilliant man who prostitutes his talents in the service of prejudice and falsehood. They said this was, I don't know if you've ever heard question time in the House of Commons. That's what they said, just like, women fainting. This is Victorian, Europe here. So it was, it must have been an exciting day. Here's a contemporary cartoon to show you. It's all about man and apes. Okay. So we move ahead now to 1925, the Scopes-Nolte trial. Evolution really developed. We understand a lot more, by the way. We had Mendelian genetic theory, which they didn't have when Darwin first came out with the origin of species. So we had inheritance clearly. We knew the age of the earth a little better, so it was firmly ensconced here. Okay, this trial involves three principles. The man in the middle, John Scopes, is a science and math teacher, and he has had occasion to teach evolution. And what happened in this little town of Dayton, Tennessee, is the fathers, town fathers, felt that they wanted to draw some tourists into this little backwater. And if they had a trial with evolution versus the Bible, that it might just do that, because they had an anti-evolution law in the books, but they never really enforced it. So they go after Scopes as a test case kind of thing. Well, the newspapers get hold of this and it goes viral. However, things went viral in 1925, it would be newspapers. The radio is just coming into play, but how much that had to do with the dissemination of the hoopla of this trial is not really clear. So as soon as word gets out, well, we have William Jennings Bryan on the left, who was a 3 times presidential candidate, Secretary of State, great biblical scholar, and he comes forward and says, I'll do the prosecution, pro bono. So the local guys jumped it out of the way. Well, when that happened, Clarence Darrow, who wanted to retire, the most famous defense attorney, and if you do any reading, the Leopold Loeb trial, some famous other trials where he defended, he comes forward to defend Scopes. So the trial for the defense, I'm sorry about that. Here's one picture, just to give you a flavor of things. There are about 1,000 people that day that Brian shows up for the trial. Here he is. Here's a local guy carrying this beautiful suitcase, and we got, as I said, 1,000 people there, and they have one thing in common. About 98% of them have about one thing in common. They don't even know what evolution is. It's not that they're pro or anti. They found this out as they began to interview potential jurors, and they'd ask them about evolution. It's evolution. They don't know. They know their Bible, but they don't know anything about evolution. So let's see. The trial gets going. A big festive atmosphere on the outside. This was our promo photo. But there were many stations like this, things going on around the courthouse. And this one book I'd love to get hold of here, Hell in High School. It must be a real page turner. So we have the trial goes on. Whoops, I jumped ahead on my slides in a second. But it's very hot in the courtroom. It's over 100 degrees. So the men do take their coats off, which is very unusual. In the 20s, you would stay dressed. But number one, it's still too hot inside. So the judge says, oh, we'll go outside. It's cooler under the trees. And all the people, they figured 3,000 to 5,000 people were around all the time to follow what was going on in the trial. Well, the prosecution was fairly simple in the sense, did he teach evolution or not? And the answer was, yes, he did. A student came and said, yes, I was taught evolution. And that's the prosecution's case. So the defense gets up. Darrow has to make a defense case. He brings in a couple of biologists, people who know about evolution. He wants them to speak about the fact that this is the generally accepted dogma now in science. But the judge says, wait a minute, did he teach evolution or not? That's what the law is about. They can't, none of these people can speak. So Darrow, very resourceful, he says, look, what about an expert on the Bible? Can I bring in an expert on the Bible? He says, no, okay, that would be all right. And he turns to Brian, who happens to be an expert on the Bible. Mr. Brian, would you testify about the Bible on the stand? So Brian agrees to do it. And we're here at a moment where Darrow, who's standing, is examining Brian, who's sitting here answering the questions. And so Darrow's got a Bible with a bunch of little markers at different spots. And he goes to one of them and he said, what about Joshua in the Battle of Jericho? Did the sun stand still? Well, Brian squirms a little bit because he's far. He believes in a heliocentric system. So the sun is standing still already. He said, well, probably the earth must have stood still. Oh, the earth stood still. You're interpreting the Bible, number one. And number two is he goes to what are all the horrible consequences. The earth, where we're all moving about 800-900 miles an hour. If it suddenly went to zero, it would be like being in a crash in a jet plane or something. But so things look bad here. And one other case we'll look at is, we know, what is this? What about Joshua and the whale here? Well, Brian says, he didn't say whale, it says fish. Oh, so Darrow says, well, is it a specially designed fish to swallow, be able to swallow a gentleman? And well, it only says fish. And how long was he in there? 3 days? Oh. And then he was spit out and he was okay. So there are a whole bunch of things like this that are brought out in the testimony. And the journalists, by the way, which there were 100 of them from all over the country, writing all this stuff down and reporting. Most of their reports would be these tidbits of testimony about this, the extreme things in the Bible. For all the good stuff that's in it, we do have a lot of these extreme things. And Darrow, at some point, he's walking by Brian and he says, I'm really here to make sure that ignoramuses don't take over the education of the American students. And Brian gets furious. He gets up. They said he shook his hand. He started to turn blue. He said, and I'm here to defend the word of God against atheists and agnostics. And the judge said, okay, stop. That's it. That's the end of the testimony. We're adjourning for today. And the information gets spread around. The next morning, the court resumes again. And Brian has prepared 5 pages of answers, because this is the problem. He was being beaten up with questions by Darrow, and he couldn't really explain anything. So Brian's all set with his 5 pages because he's allowed the summation. But they start in the morning, and Brian has his big statement ready, but Darrow gets up and said, we plead guilty, Judge, you want to pay the fine. And all over it. The Brian never gets to explain it. So, well, and what happens is Brian, sadly, 5 days later, he dies. That's it. He never actually got home. He went to sleep for a nap one afternoon, and that was that. So, by the way, here's one more cartoon from the time to give you an idea of what would their judgment be? What would their judgment be? Okay, we're going to get to Lysenkoism here. Let me make sure. Yeah, Lysenkoism, we're okay. So this is a terrible story. I'll kind of tell this fairly quickly here. We have to do a little Russian history first. We've got the revolution, 1917. Lenin comes to power. Lenin dies. Then Stalin spends the next 30 years in power until he dies also. Now, in the 20s, Lysenko, an agricultural scientist, comes to Stalin's attention, and Stalin loves what he has to say. And Lysenko has tremendous influence. He's put in charge of agriculture for the whole country, and his influence extends well beyond Stalin's death. And agriculture is very important. You know, Russia, besides being its own breadbasket, it's the breadbasket for much of Europe. You know, they were the biggest agriculture power. They had good biology, good agricultural science, until Lysenko came along. Okay, so here's Lysenko. We'll give one quote here, which I have to read here. Mendel's heredity science demonstrates with striking clarity the connection between capitalistic science and the corruption of bourgeois society. So this is his view of things. Here's a statue, a combination of Stalin and with Lysenko. And Stalin loved his ideas. And the key idea he loved was that Lysenko said that acquired traits could be inherited, which was discredited, the Lamarckian idea from 100 years before, that if you, let's say you learn to be a really good ball player or something, that your child would be a better ball player, and ad infinitum, we went on. Now, Stalin liked this because communism was supposed to get better and better with time, you know, generation by generation. Now, of course, Lysenko was concerned about wheat, but Stalin jumped on this as, look, in the first generation, I may have two good communist parents, and when their kids are born, their brains now are going to have communism locked in it from infancy, and they're going to be even better communists. And the next generations will also have more and more of this communist ideology locked in, and soon we'll get to the ideal world where the state withers away, you know, the old communist view. And so Lysenko really ruled the roost. So the gist of it, in summary, there's no genetic material that carries traits forward, according to the new Lysenko view of things. 3,000 biologists over that were arrested, many killed, because well, this was nonsense. This was absolute nonsense. Some of them kind of recanted so they could save their skins. But so Stalin, excuse me, along with the government, press, and media, along with Lysenko, they went to work on the agriculture system with two things: collectivization and Lysenko biology, if we can call it that. And the net result here is the Great Famine, with over 6 million people died here. When this happened, and of course this developed over several years, they turned to Lysenko, what's going on here? Well, these farmers are no good, they're just incompetent. But they're trying to sabotage me, you know, the standard response of a dictatorship to you know, problems among the citizens. And it was really a horrible thing that never should have happened, a real distortion of science. And that wasn't the end of it. Whoops. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Chairman Mao comes to power in 1949, I guess, and he wants to step things up real fast. I'm going to use the Soviet model to run my country. So he copies everything, Lysenkoism and collectivization, and they feel for sure 40 million people at least died as a result of this. I mean, between these 40 million and the 6 million in Europe, the truth of the matter is Lysenko killed about as many people as the entire Second World War. You know, these are big numbers. Of course, we don't hear about all this stuff, but it's just a terrible story. This is a horrible thing. Putin is trying to get rid of the European influence on Russia. We want the great Asian empire. And Lysenko was a pure Russian. He was not a convert from Western views. He was, you know, Russian communist all the way, and he's become kind of a folk hero. Fortunately, the agriculture hasn't changed yet, but it's still shocking enough, you know, to me when I came across this. All right, we've got one relatively contemporary story here, and let me. I think we'll be okay doing this. Bendectin happened to be a drug for morning sickness that was taken. We're back now in the 80s. It was taken by millions of women all over the world. It had been studied, you know, standard development of a drug. There were epidemiological studies of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and it seemed, you know, really to be okay. And the family, the Daubert family, had a child with a birth defect, and Mrs. Daubert had taken Bendectin a couple of times, And she wondered about that, Well, then she read a newspaper account of another woman who had a child with a birth defect, who had also taken Bedectin. Well, this was the beginning of a big story. I mean, look, think of it this way: drug causes birth defects. Hey, that's front page news. Front page news. So, word gets around all over the country. Suits against Merrill Dow are tremendous. They withdraw the drug. They set up one of these big funds of hundreds of millions of dollars to try to pay off these cases of birth defects, and that would kind of be the end of it. But the Daubert case went on, and at Merrill Dow's request, it's moved to federal court. It had been local, but now it's in federal court. And the Daubert experts testified about concerning opinions. Here's what we've got. In summary, one of their experts said that the molecular structure of this stuff is so worrisome, it'll be so reactive, it could easily cause birth defects. That was his view. The two others picked on the epidemiological studies. One said, well, they didn't see any effect, but they might have missed a small effect. That was the view there. And then the last one felt, oh, they just completely incorrectly analyzed everything. That was the Daubert's experts' view. On the other hand, the Merrill Dow guy said, look, we're going to stick with the epidemiological studies. That's why we did them, with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And the judge, after hearing everything, just gave summary judgment to Dow that the Daubert's case was thrown out. But you can appeal, and which they did. Oh, by the way, the argument the judge used is a thing called the Fry Standard from the 1920s. That if you want to have expert testimony, it has to be based on principles generally accepted by the scientific community. All the Daubert experts were expressing their personal opinion, which had never been published or reviewed. So he discounted them, whereas the epidemiological studies had all been published. So they still appeal, and they go to the Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court decides that they have to amplify that little Fry Standard, which is just a sentence or two, because trials are getting more complicated, as time goes on. So they want to have a better, broader statement of principles that allow judges to decide what to do about expert witnesses. And they appeal to some of the writers. They go back to some of the writers, particularly the philosopher Karl Popper, who had something to say. And his work was influenced greatly by a lecture he went to by Albert Einstein in 1915. And in that lecture, he was surprised, but Einstein was very humble. He was talking about his theory, which he believed he had worked on for 10 years. But he said, look, my theory is not going to be accepted unless it can pass an experimental test. And he said it's going to have to wait. They figured 1919 eclipse, they would actually be able to run the test that he wanted to do. So after hearing this, Popper came up with a general principle that he said, look, I think all good scientific theories have to be falsifiable. In other words, potentially falsifiable. Now, in some ways it's obvious, in some ways it's a little bit subtle, but that was a principle he came forward with. And we'll see, but just quickly to show you what Einstein was working on here. He just said, look, gravity bends light. So if you have a star that's close to the sun, light from that tends to get bent, it comes to the earth. And if you're in an eclipse and you can see the stars near the sun, it'll appear that the star has moved a little bit. So if we take photographs during this eclipse, which was coming in 1919, we should see the star out of place. And Einstein could say you should see it out of place by so many minutes of arc. So he knew what the answer ought to be if his theory worked. So he kind of had everything laid out here. But let's just go through what's happened here and what the court finally decided, because the standard gets much more complicated. He said, look, if it fails the experimental test, it's going to be proven false. So the Supreme Court, look at that, I even lost the highlight too. No, these are all highlighted in yellow. Okay. A theory behind expert testimony must be falsifiable. That's what the Supreme Court says, part of our standard. He also knew the experimental error, and it then says now that the theory behind expert testimony must indicate likely error. And so it's leaning on these experts pretty hard. Here we go further. It had to have already been peer reviewed and published. And while Einstein's was, none of the work of the Darwin people had been. So, and finally he said that it has to get general acceptance, which goes along with the old theory. So we've got a whole new set of standards. The falsification, the likely error, acceptable, peer review. So the judges really have their hands full now. The judges are suddenly gatekeepers for all this stuff on a big scale. In fact, it's even suggested, the court suggests, Judge, you guys got to go hire your own experts. Nothing to do with the two parties in the trial, but see if you can learn a little science here. It's kind of like a meta trial almost, you know. We're going to hear the first set of experts so we can see if the second set of experts testifies. So it's complicated. The whole thing is very, very complicated. And I think that's really the main point. Well, fortunately for us, the press doesn't worry about complications. The fact that the Dorberts had failed in their case was not reported. Like the Washington Post, they reported at the beginning, Bendectin causes birth defects, big trial. The fact that they lost and it didn't cause birth defects, they didn't publish another article. There wasn't even a little correction on page 27. They just let it go. On the other hand, the New York Times really attempted to discuss what happened. But the truth is, this is so complicated, the reporter didn't understand it well enough to explain it. So at least they tried. At least they tried. Okay. So 1919 comes, by the way, and Einstein's theory ends up being proven, essentially, that what he predicted actually comes true. This is what makes Einstein Einstein. We all know the term, but before that, he was just a great scientist. And scientists knew that, but nobody else knew about it. But all of a sudden, the way this was spread out over the world for reasons we could discuss, there's a whole book about this. But the idea is we now think, oh, hey, that guy's not an Einstein. That guy's a real Einstein. It's now a noun. It's like it's a thing. So, in fact, he ended up being correct here. But I thought I would say this in defense of everybody in the courts and the problems that you may face, even as a juror sometime, is that, you know, can judges and juries really cope with progress? If we look way back here, you know, in Galileo's time, we just don't have much going on here in 1660. You know, the amount of knowledge, if that graph stands for the amount of knowledge, there's just not much there. And even up to about 1800, there's still the lightning rod, there's not that much. In fact, Isaac Asimov said, here's about the point. Right up to here, you could be, if you were a bright guy and you worked hard, you could understand everything anybody knew. But look at that curve. Once it turns around like that and goes up, nobody can understand everything that's going on. So it just makes the world a complicated place for scientists and engineers and technical people, and doctors, everyone. It makes it more complicated. Can we really cope? This is not an easy answer here to this question, and I leave it. I don't mean I can't solve this problem, but to recognize it, I can't get up here and do this. Let's see if this. I think there's one other. Oh yeah, the optional extra case. Should I do this? I hate to delve into it. You think so? Okay. All right. We'll just do a brief version from this. Whoops. There are some things happening with this case right now. Lucy Lepke is a nurse in a neonatal care unit, and the number of babies die unexpectedly there, like 25 babies, and they decide that she's the one who's responsible. She's put on trial, convicted, and she's many life sentences that she has as a result. Now, this case caused such a sensation that the government said, how could this happen? You know, maybe one or two babies, but how could somebody be working there and all these people, you know, all these cases where children are dying, these poor little children, only a few weeks old. So they said, we have to investigate. Well, they started to look at the evidence. Let's see if I can get, here's the key evidence that led the hospital authorities to go to the police. See if we can see what this diagram is. This is a shift diagram here. We've got, first of all, the vertical column, these are babies who passed away, or they just no names or anything. And of course, the top of the nurses who worked. These are all redacted except the nurse in question, Lucy. And you'll notice for every one of the babies that died, she was working. And what they did was they went to the police with this tape. And That was the key piece of evidence. The police can always find other evidence. But once they had this grounding, we had confirmation bias. They went after all these things that happened. Oh, Lucy must have done this. Lucy must have done this. That's our story here. But after the government said we got to reinvestigate this, they found out that statisticians said that that's scientifically worthless. That whole picture I showed you with the purple thing with Lucy at work, that's all nonsense. You can't operate that way. And the reason is that they left out 10 other babies who died. They just didn't include them. Oh, why didn't they include them? Well, they were sick. Well, they were all sick. They all died. So there's something wrong here. So they said, it's actually, I can't talk about the whole case, but this is a fallacy called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Here's our Texas sharpshooter. He's up here. He's got a big giant target. He's banging away. It's all full of holes. And then when he's all through, because he wants to report his results, he notices that there's a whole bunch of shots together. So he paints a bullseye around it, and then he hands in his little target, and he's really a good shooter. That's exactly what they did. This is what that shift thing did, you see. And so, unfortunately for Lucy, the collection of that shift diagram and all the other evidence, there's no way that she's going to get out. People who want to speak up and say it doesn't look like justice was done in this case have been beaten down. The British Journal of Medicine, they had like 5 editorials. One of them was justice may not have been done in this case, and the other 4 were supporting the government. They already, like a couple of days later, the one that said there may be questions about Lucy's trial was just removed, which is unfortunate. So that's it. That's as far as they go. Why is this important? Who are the people who sent this to the police? The administrators at the hospital, many of whom were probably doctors, plus the doctors in the hospital. They didn't understand this. I'm not saying that doctors should be great statisticians, but at least this could have been brought to some people with statistical understanding before they went to the police. They said that was really the error, that they went to the police first. But the point is, it's not a bunch of whatever we want. I don't want to label it, but let's call them know-nothings. These are people who really know a lot, the best educations in the world, and they still were buffaloed by this statistical fallacy. Okay, I won't say anymore. You should read about the Lucy Letby case. There's a giant New Yorker article, and see what you think yourself about it. But thank you very much.